Okay, hi everyone. This is Sudeshna Sen. I'm your host and founder of Pionyr, the go-to network for women founders and entrepreneurs. So welcome to this session. This is going to be an interactive session. So feel free to drop in your questions as we go, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible during the session. And before we dive in, we would love to learn a little bit more about you and your journey. So feel free to share what you're building, where you're from, and of course, share your LinkedIn profile. With that, and I'm excited for today's conversation because I think it tackles something I see a lot of founders in Pioneer especially face, which is that they are waiting because they don't have a technical co-founder yet, waiting for funding, or just waiting for a multitude of reasons. And as we all know, like waiting as in no action, it is costly. So today we are flipping the script and we will be discussing how you can start building without waiting for funding, without waiting for a technical co-founder. And with that, I'm thrilled to be joined by Ela Hunter, who is the founder of Nurovibe and also a member of Pioneer. So Ella, welcome to Pioneer webinar. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this conversation. I think that's the polite question of so who are you and why the heck should we listen to you on this topic? So I've built about 12 different businesses. Not all of them were mine. I was the founder of three of those businesses. My first startup was with two co-founders. It was an import and export marketplace, and we exited within 3 years. That's a happy story. The second story, it didn't work on the co-founder front as well. So I was very fortunate, and then the second time around, I learned some tough lessons. In between startups, I was building a few businesses, particularly at the start of my corporate journey, and then as I headed into the more financial services sector, the scale and the speed of building businesses, as some of you guys know from that area. You go from being a speedboat to a little bit of an oil tanker in terms of launching new businesses. And then as the third dimension, so from founder then to in the corporate space, third dimension was as a fractional to venture-backed companies. I got to see some really tough lessons, some really good ones, but it was very clear to me 2021, you guys remember, especially if you're venture back, that the whole world of venture capital changed in terms of the way things were being done. And so going into this third one, Nurovibe, I knew that the playbook had changed. Everything that got me here is not what's going to get me to the next phase. And it doesn't matter how many businesses I'd built. I knew I had to rewire myself and start again in terms of how I launched this new business.
Great to have you, Ella, with us. So before we get started, I'd love to start with a quick check-in with all of you to get a sense of what's your current status. Um, and my question to this group is really like, hi, everyone, can you please mute yourself during this conversation? Thank you. So the question that we have, a quick check-in for all of you, is that are you building right now without a tech co-founder or a CTO? Or are you waiting for a tech co-founder or a CTO to build? Or do you already have one? Because we want to get a sense of, where all of you are coming from.
Okay, I get that you wanted an interactive session, so I'm gonna jump in here and try. Hi, nice to meet you guys. I am actually looking to avoid a CTO for like the first year or so, and was hoping, right, like my model is I want to build lots of different kinds of tech that I suspect will need a variety of skill sets, and I'm better served outsourcing it to engineering companies that might have expertise in maybe some specific coding languages, and it will cost me. But I also prefer to have, right, like the professionalism of being able to have a contract. And when I don't like the service, being able to get rid of them without the same kind of issues. Um, that said, I'm trying to raise capital, and it's very challenging, right? When they're like, oh, you want to build tech and you have no tech people. I'm like, yeah, I don't want them. So that's kind of where I am. So not necessarily waiting, although I suspect that I should be scoping in more detail the first few things on my roadmap to build.
I think, Dani, that's something definitely, we will be covering more details on how we go about that today in today's session, but glad we have that context. So Ella, we will get to that.
Yeah.
So as Dani said, and I think mostly I see across based on the what folks are writing, we have a lot of folks building without a CTO, without a co-founder, and in your case, Dani, you also are waiting for a year to find that to build without one. But there are also a lot of non-tech founders I see within Pioneer who are just waiting, like you. And sometimes they're waiting not just for a year, at times multiple years. So Ella, why don't we start with your story? Why did you not wait? Tell us more about your story with Nurovibe and how you got started.
Yeah, I'll start with a bit of a confession. Okay, so I think my perspective on this is when you do find the right co-founder, and I say if it's the maximum superpower because that co-founder can augment your capabilities. They can 10x you if you have your standing both behind a really good vision, you bring in complementary capabilities. That just opens up so many opportunities. It can take you from the 100 million valuation to the billion valuation. There's so many success stories. The truth is, it doesn't happen very often. In fact, I remember I was sitting in a founders dinner once, and it was close to Christmas, so everybody was going around and they were saying what they were thankful for, and and everybody was saying what you would expect, like they were grateful for the customers, grateful for the growth, etc. And then one of them said, I just feel I have the best co-founder in the world, and I'm just super lucky. And at that point, everybody just looked around and like, whoa, we weren't expecting this. That guy won the lottery. I think I wasn't the only person to think, I wish I could have said that. But it's nobody in that table was in the same situation. And I've seen it working across many venture-backed companies where that is actually very rare. So the point of this conversation is, well, that doesn't happen to a lot of us. It might happen at some point later on in the journey. But even if it happens later on, you don't have to wait, which is the point here. So with Nurovibe, I did start. In fact, I didn't want to wait. I brought in a search firm because I didn't want to wait at all. And I gave them the brief, and they found an amazing co-founder. And within a month, I found out that he was actually tied. His equity had invested, and it wasn't covered by the due diligence. It was double burned by the agency and by the guy. A month went by, and I had nothing to show for it, not a single line of code. And then I said, screw this. I'm going to find my own co-founder. And I went through everything that you can imagine on deck, YC, etc., different forums. And I found two potential ones. We did the usual test, so no equity, don't commit. You small scope, quick test, and see if it's going to work out. See if the energy works, their commitment, etc. And I onboarded both of them. For one of them, week I think 2 or 3, he started making a lot of comments about salary and pay. And for anybody who has experienced that, if your co-founder is especially in the very early stages, very focused on the pay aspect, I would urge you to ask yourself, did you really find a co-founder or did you find an employee or a contractor? Right. So I knew the answer, and that's why I kept on with the other guy. He was actually an exited CTO, a lot of track record, good experience, but because of this build wealth, he decided I'm going to build a VC fund, and he thought he was going to run the startup company and the VC at the same time. And I said, no, you're not. You cannot do both at the same time. So now I had 2 months and no single line of code to show for it, and I said, okay, that's it. And there has to be a better way. And that's when I decided to look for alternative models, and that's how we got progress so much quicker just by exploring those alternative models.
So that's amazing, Ella. Like you had to get burnt, and I'm glad you sort of, went through this pretty fast for you to realize that there are ways in which you can get going. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think most of the founders follow the traditional script that YC and some other, big players out there have given us, in which, founders are actively waiting and looking for the right co-founder or right tech co-founder. And that takes a ton of time because, as YCs say, you need the co-founder to then raise capital to then, have the funding to secure a team and then start building. But you did not go this route. So, what's your take on this old playbook? And talk a little bit more about your take and why do you think we need to pivot right now?
Yeah, just first before your reaction, because you mentioned YC there, and of course, Sam Altman used to run or be the CEO of YC, and he already said that the next unicorn is going to be a one-man band. Everybody has heard that. I think still the world of VCs, they still frown upon a non-tech founder and being a single. I think that's going to eventually change because there's too many cases of success. So. I don't think we're there yet, but I think the tide will eventually shift. Okay, so how do you develop without a tech co-founder? So let me give you 4 ways, and I'll start from the worst to the best. So, and I think we heard that a little bit from Denny. Some others might tried a bit of this. So I think there's a variant here in terms of if you're willing to pay capital or equity. But either way, one way in which you can start is you bring a senior engineer without a co-founder title. You don't give them a co-founder title, gives you more flexibility. You either pay them capital, pay a decent salary for somebody, that brings the quality that you like. If you don't give them a co-founder title, as you know, you're less likely to bring in caliber, or you have a sort of earn out or some sort of vesting where they actually have to earn um, that particular title. But it dilutes the cap table. This puts a lot of pressure for this person to be the right person, because if they don't, in the long term, unwinding the cap table, as you know, it's a bit of a nightmare, and you might end up with debt equity, which is, you don't want to end up with there, especially if you want to raise. And the other huge risk of this option is even if you find, like, even for months, the relationship is perfect, everything is working super well, they're building the code, anything can happen. And I've seen the stories. It could be something health related. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with the company. It could be an exogenous factor. If they leave, they've been the only person building code, there's no continuity. Okay, so now you have to bring in someone else on top of them to be working alongside them. So when they do leave, you have that continuity. So you can even hire one, you have to bring in at least 2 people. Because if you don't understand the code and you're not able to read it, you won't be able to delegate to the next person. So that's one of them with those risks. Another one is you either bring in a boutique development firm or an agency. Look, this is more used than you can imagine. Companies like Venmo, quite a few companies in Product Hunt, they have brought in some of those boutiques. Some of them are really good. They can build your V1. You can get a really polished MVP quickly. They have the expertise, they have the ability to debug, they'll bring in testing, experimentation. So they're taking off the risk from you. And you don't have that dependency on one person because the agency is on the hook. I particularly like this because, and this is depending on how you structure the deal. If they don't deliver, they don't get paid. Okay, so now you've put yourself in a position where you're de-risking the delivery. However, as I said at the start of this, if you do want to get VC funding, because the shift hasn't happened yet, a lot of VCs are going to tell you you're untouchable. They don't want to have a company without I think Danny mentioned that they don't want to see a company without a CTO or some sort of tech capability, especially if you're classified as a tech company. So the third one is you just do it yourself. You know exactly what you want, you have a vision, and you start using tools. You can use vibe coding, you use Claude, MCP, or you can start, if you don't know how to prompt for the vibe coding to get you exactly what you need, you use the GPTs to help you give better prompts so you can get better coding. So I sometimes test them against each other so they audit each other, and then you eventually get a good output. But depending on how complex it is what you're building, this sort of V1 can get you very far in terms of validation and testing, but it might not get you over the line depending on, the backend capabilities, integration that you might need. Um, but it's great when you need that validation because you can put this in front of, your target customers and see how they react and whether your product has legs. And the fourth one, which I like the best, is a bit of a hybrid. Because I love the idea that you didn't wait, you just went ahead and built a prototype, which you can build in a day, thanks to these tools, and start to validate it. Jump on the call with your dream 100 list, or whoever you're testing your product with, and start getting feedback and iterating quickly. And this is the beauty of this, that before, like even just before vibe coding last year, you had to ask for an agency to build this, and it was like 500,000 before you even got the feedback. Now you can do it within a day for less than 100. So if it doesn't work, you just sunk 100 on a day, or maybe even less. If you're just using one of these tools and you don't even, if you're still using the free version, maybe you got it for free. So um, you can start that iteration very quickly. However, what I do like is you validate the tool, and then once you know it's validated, now you can start spending. So you know that first sort of V1 with the vibe coding is not quite solid. It's not going to get you what you need. It's not going to get the reliability. It doesn't have your APIs or integrations that you need. Fine, that you're now fine to spend because you validated it. So now you can bring in a contractor, or you can bring in the agency. They already have your vision, you already have the prototype, you have the flow, and now you have the two together. You have the front end, and you have now the experience from um, the agency or the boutique firm ironing out any bugs that you weren't able to get from the vibe coding version.
So there are so many different ways that you can approach it. I'd love if anyone from the audience wants to chip in on how they are building without a co-founder, because a lot of you looks like are building by yourself. Does what is what Ella's suggesting? Is it how you're building, or are you using a different approach? Anyone?
I'm happy to go.
Go for it, Sarah.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can call what I'm doing building, is basically what I'm starting with is assembling existing AI tools to make a use case for AI for educators and for small businesses. So first helping them go through the process. The aim eventually will be to build some sort of a GPT that really focuses on teachers and creating differentiated lesson plans and blah, 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 blah. But that's down the road. So right now I'm basically doing my offering around how to use what's existing, how to use Chat GPT, Copilot, what are sort of prompts that you put in, so basically I'm helping people get comfortable with what's already in the market before I go the next step of developing either my custom product or offering them to develop a custom product for them, at which case I probably will do what you're saying and go to maybe a boutique firm to design it for them. But if the cost is really high, doing what you're saying, where I find a tool where I can play around with it, iterate, and then maybe once I'm comfortable, offer that as the solution for them.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the best, your advantage, Sarah, is that you've already been working with customers, so you have the feedback. I see a lot of people, they jump in and they start using the tool, so they probably go one step further to you on the actual coding, but
Yeah.
without the feedback. And so it could
Mhm.
just backfire because they don't even know if they built the right thing. It doesn't have to be that expensive. I think this is the other part of the major shift that has happened within a year, because you can now put in a bid and get quotes for what you're trying to build. And depending on what you get, it could be quite cost efficient. And if they're trying to sell you something that is too big, you don't have to take it. And I personally like the approach of some of those boutiques with it when it's milestone payments, meaning if you don't deliver X for me and you define like this is not going to work unless I have this functionality, I know that's what my customers want. If you don't deliver this by the next month, like you don't get paid. So they're in the game with you. In order for them to win, you have to win. That's how I like to structure the contracts.
And that's a good point you bring up, Ella. Like the
Great,
way we
thanks.
structure contracts is very critical. And I'd love to hear from the audience, like how are you structuring contracts? Is it, as Ella said, results as a service, as in very outcome oriented? Or are you structuring contracts that are project based, retainer based, equity based, or a combination? And while folks respond, Ella, why don't you double down? Because there are two things that you said that really stood out. One is that you're structuring contracts in a very outcome-driven format, and then you're also hiring on-demand teams. Let's talk about the contracts. So, I mean, often I see that, non-tech founders, they're looking to hire this entire team, engineers, designers, marketers, all of them in-house. And that's, as you know, and as Sarah mentioned, like, very expensive and it's just premature. So, you said that we can, a shortcut would be to just hire the right people and structure the contracts right. So talk to us a little bit about this, the way you structure your contracts so you get the most out of these uh, contracts.
Yeah, I think you have two questions in one. So I'll start with the basic one and then we'll get into RAS. Um, I think if you're, excuse me, if you're trying to assemble a full stack startup team, designer, engineers, PM, marketers, before you have proved the product, that's your fastest way to burn cash and dilute equity. So the question I have, for you guys is why would you hire, as in bring them into your payroll, add in all the health benefits, taxes, etc., before you hit PMF, product market fit? Why would you do that? The principle here is to avoid premature optimization. The resources are flexible if you think about it differently. So a lot of us come from corporate, and that's the corporate way of thinking. If you need X task, you hire, right? And as I said before, 2021 VC world, very tech driven companies. I worked also with biotech companies. The CTO co-founder typically see themselves as the CTO and they start delegating. So they bring in the designer, they bring the database, they bring in the data scientist, and the architect, etc. They're building an empire and they're doing now not coding what you were expecting. You hoped they were going to do the work. Now they're delegating. And that is when the cost starts creeping. And of course, now you have to do more fundraising because costs are getting out of hand. And that's how, the empire keeps building, but, cash coming in, cash coming out because the team keeps growing. Now, you don't have to think corporate. We're not in the corporate world. We're in the founder world. But if some of you still think, I don't want, I still want world-class talent. I don't want to go, minimize and get somebody who's not optimal. If you want world-class talent, you don't have to go fractional. Because there's amazing fractional talent, and you can get that top talent, and you can get them in for the specific task or the specific period of time without bringing them into your payroll. So that's one thing. If you still think between corporate and I have to have the absolute best out there, the fractional is for you. However, if you don't feel like this type of task, because it isn't that big, you might have something specific on your workflow and you just want to automate it. You don't need that sort of chief exec type vibe. You can get you hire for a task. So for instance, if you want the UI design, create a contest in some of these platforms. Like for my UI design for my book, I'm going to, but you can, this is very common for apps. Go to 99 Designs and create a contest. You only pay for the winning design. The same thing you can do with your marketing. There's a platform where you can get influencers to post campaigns for you, and they all bid, right? And you only hire the ones that give you the best copy, the best video. And if you don't like it, you don't pay. So now you have that flexibility. And instead of hiring for a full-time dev to optimize onboarding, you can build proposals. And you can say, look, I don't want to hire. What I want is, for example, I need a native flow with a paywall, with mixed panel in 10 days. 10 days, you pay them, they deliver, out. Goal achieved, you didn't need to hire. One tip here, just mentioning automation, is automate before you hire, right? Software is your first team. So you can build until a human becomes inevitable, right? So your next question was RAS. So this is where you want to bring in folks. It can get really lonely and overwhelming if you're trying to do everything. So you want to also get some expertise. Hopefully you guys don't hear my dog barking. I'll keep going. So RAS, why does RAS exist? Results as a service instead of software as a service. This is the next iteration. Because you want to stop paying for time. Stop paying for time, start paying for results. And in a RAS model, you define a concrete outcome. So you would say, like, I want to launch a paywall that converts at times 4. That's what you're paying for. So if they don't deliver that, they don't get paid. You hire specialists to deliver on your task instead of clocking time. And you eliminate all this coordination of tasks and micromanagement and bloating teams and all this sort of management. You didn't, I think I'm not speaking for everyone, but tell me in the chat if I'm completely wrong, but you probably started this company because you have a vision of something that you really want to bring into the world. You didn't hire because you wanted to deal with payroll or taxes or managing people, getting things over the line. So you don't have to. If you think that way, like I do, things will get done, and you don't have to do any of those things. If you structure your contracts based uh, on RAS. But not many companies are set up that way. So, for instance, I was getting approaches because I'm also publishing a book. The PR world operates still in that way. So they'll tell you something like, I only work in a retainer, right? So in order for you to work with me, in order for you to have the privilege of working with me, they'll put it this way, you need to pay me 6 months retainer up front. I'm like, what? Um, and that's the way they work. And so once you pay up front, what's the incentive? They already have the cash. And so what happens is that, oh, well, the first month we had to get to know you and build a bio and understand your business well and what you're doing. And then maybe by month 3, we might get you 1 publication, no guarantees. We can't guarantee anything. This is completely out of our hands. The publications will design. And then if not, by month 6, well, sorry, we tried, but if it didn't work out, obviously it wasn't them, it was you, it was your product, it was your pricing. So why would you want to structure that? And then I thought the PR world just operated that way. And of course, here it comes a PR agency that sees this and they set up themselves as RAS, and now they're flying. I mean, why would anybody want anything else other than somebody who guarantees you results? And if they don't deliver, they don't get paid. Like, so of course they're killing it. So it is transitioning. Not everybody's on that space yet. But think yourself when somebody's offering you a contract, if they're not sure they can deliver results to you, if they're not confident that they can deliver what you're asking by giving you a RAS, then why would you hire them? if they're seasoned experts and they've been doing this for years and they have, all those testimonials on the website that is working, why would they not be comfortable backing up results? Right?
That's a great point, Ella. And I think this is for all founders. There's always a smarter way in building teams. It could be, as Ella said, as you are hiring the extension of you through these freelancers and contractors, think of ways in which you're not taken advantage of, like RAS, results as a service, is one of them. And one thing you hit upon, Ella, before we get into a question from the audience on tools and tech, which we will cover in a bit, that you guys can use to sort of take it to the next level. A question I want to ask is on sort of a broader concept that you're hitting upon, which is instead of hiring and being sucked into payroll and legal and tax, which is typical when you're hiring people in your startup, consider on-demand teams. I think that's the broader sort of concept that you're hitting upon. And talk to us a little bit about this. Like, why not? I mean, I would say as a founder, they would question you, perhaps challenge you. I think this is an amazing engineer. I want this person on my team. Why should I not hire? Why should I just, have on-demand engineers, for example? So what are the big advantages to have an on-demand team rather than in-house team?
Look, the reality is you could have an engineer that is super flexible and eager to learn, and they'll shape and they'll take on new learning as the startup evolves. That's absolutely ideal. If you find that engineer, hold on to them. Um, what you also find, I think in most of the cases, is experts. So when you have experts, they are boxing themselves in. So I'll give you two examples. Let's start first with your example. You started with the tech. When you're building your first, your V1 or your, MVP, or there's so many different names, minimum level product, whatever you want to call it. Um, you're building something very simple. Okay, you're at the stage where you're just validating demand. So if you're a bit ruthless in terms of what do my customers really want, and you've done the research, you've done the validation, then you should have a very limited scope. Some of the most successful business start with one single functionality, as opposed to starting with a list of 10, 20. That's the easiest way to kind of lose focus and lose control of your company. But if you've nailed down your one or two core features of your product, then you can start building something very simple and you don't need to bring in, the full spec capability of somebody who does, the sort of backend architecture, the data, the flows, and just something super simple. And that person can get you over the line to validation. Now, you validated your product, you have your MVP, and it's working very simply. And now you start realizing, oh my God, the payment engine integration is not working well, or I need to be A/B testing my paywall constantly, or I need to integrate this KPIs. Well, great. That means you're evolving, you're growing, and your business has new needs. You're on the right track. Fantastic. Now's the time to bring in more expertise, but you didn't have to bring them from day one because you were just a stage of validating. So great. Now I bring in somebody who can integrate the APIs, integrate the payments. I have a different brief. It's like, I need an integrator for this specific APIs in this amount of time that can work with this tech stack. Super specific. You got the integrations done. And now you start finding, oh, but there's customer support. Great problem to have, right? Before you didn't even have customers. Now you're like, how do I support them? Okay, now you have to bring in somebody who can integrate some sort of AI chat functionality for support at the highest level. But now I need to bring in somebody who deals with real troubleshooting. So how do I do that? Great. These are sort of the great founder problems to have. Okay, now you need to bring in somebody else. But the guy who deals with this sort of back-end support didn't have to be the guy who built your first prototype. Different capability. So you're going through cycles, and each cycle is telling you a little bit about the new capabilities that you need. And the greatness is all of these people don't have to stick in the payroll. You can make it dynamic as you evolve. Okay, let's switch gears to marketing. When you are pre-launch, you are bringing in capability that helps you get customers, get testing, get a product awareness. Okay, and you could do it in different ways. If you have different products, I think some of you might be more reliant on community. So you want somebody who's a community expert. Some of you don't need the community, you just need some, I'd say somebody who's going to build some initial campaigns for testing. You're in the validation stage, pre-launch. You want a pre-launch expert, and they might get you into product hunt and all those things. That's your pre-launch experts. You wouldn't bring somebody who's an expert in ads, okay? Day one. Like, why are you spending money on ads when somebody hasn't even been, the product hasn't even been validated? So the next stage is you're getting traction, you're starting generating the new revenue. Okay, now is the time to redeploy some of the revenue and start paying for ads. But now you did a different capability. It's not the pre-launch person. You might get the expert. And I jumped a few, like I missed, Goatsmark and a few other experts there. But the point is, it's cyclical. Just as your business evolves over time and you're scaling, there's new capabilities evolving. So you start bringing in new capabilities that only augment as your business grows. And if you feel this isn't going the right way, you need to pivot, then great. They're not in your payroll, so you don't have any commitments. You can just switch gears and do what you need to focus on.
That's a great point, Ella. Like, I think this is a great way to use your capital more efficiently, as in hire as you go, because your needs evolve as your startup grows and scales. But Barbara brings up a good point. There are a lot of founders who don't have capital, who don't have any funding, and you were in that place as well, Ella. So going back to your earlier days, like if you are completely bootstrapping and you don't have much capital to invest in people, like how would you go about it? Can you speak to some of the tools and platforms and strategies you used in the very beginning to build that prototype?
Well, no, the first prototype was before Vive coding. So I wish I had delayed because I would have had it. No, it's not true. Some of the backend capability was a bit complex, even for this two core functionality that I needed. And it depends what you guys are building. If you decided to go for something super complex, like in a regulated industry, you have to get, I'm sorry to say, but you'll have to get some VC funding just because of the pipes and some certifications you might need for compliance, cyber and all that. You're going to have to raise or, have a lot of capital up front, your own bootstrap, your own company, your own capital, sorry. But if you're not in that position where it's not something complex, then you're really looking at, you can start for free to build your own prototype. I do recommend, like, even if you don't have ChatGPT as a minimum or Claude that you're paying for, that's your minimum subscription. And Claude is great if you're getting to Vive coding and you get your MCPs and so forth. But you can start with something like 20 a month. Now, when you get into Vive coding, the tokens can add up very quickly if you don't know how to prompt. So don't take the risk and start just take the vibe too much, like, oh, I'm just going to say, and you can use whisper flow as what I use, so I don't even have to type, I'm just talking. And then it picks up my voice and then it starts creating instructions. But the key thing, so if you don't want to use tokens and end up spending, and by the way, if you use some of these tools, whether you're using Cursor or Replit or Lovable or what's the other one, Base 44, whatever it is that you're using, if you know how to prompt, you can still keep it very low. And some of you might say, but I'm not sure how to prompt, so I don't use too many tokens. Great. Well, that's where you bring in Claude or you bring in ChatGPT and you say, I need exact instructions to achieve this outcome with the minimum bugs, and that is going to get me X specific outcome. So you're almost reverse engineering, and you're saying, but it has to be absolutely precise so that it doesn't, gets bugs or it gets it wrong. So you're keeping the tokens going because it's not quite what you wanted. So one thing that I do, if you have multiple LLMs is I get one to audit the other. So anything that, let's say ChatGPT missed, it can be picked up by Perplexity. Perplexity refines it, and then once I know it's good, then I go into the vibe coding. So now the expense now for building that tool has gone to something like, I don't know, max for the year, and that's total for the year, even though I'm just get building this in one day, it can be something like, I don't know, less than 200. I would think some of you guys do have, 200 to spend if you don't want to bring in any people. So there's ways to do it, but you just have to be clever of how to use these tools without driving your tokens up.
So, Ella, what tools would you recommend? So you mentioned a few. You mentioned the different types of GPT platforms we can use. What else would you recommend for someone like Barbara, who's sort of in the beginning stages looking to bootstrap and build her MVP?
What's the business? Does it
Barbara, do you want to
depend?
explain?
It's a community app for travelers. So yeah, so I have a founding engineer and they are doing all of the development work. It just happens that another founder is a UX design expert. And so then myself with more of the business background. So we kind of have everything covered. But my design co-founder, who this initially started with the both of us, she tried doing the vibe coding thing and learning that, but it just turned out to be more difficult than we were anticipating, which is why we ended up bringing on a third co-founder. And we
Yeah,
didn't want to spend the money to have an outside agency or someone else work on it.
mm-hmm. And the thing with vibe coding and I think generally with AI, it's today is the worst it will ever be. So you have to remind yourself. So when I first started building agents, it was an absolute pain. I mean, the kind of work and I was saying like this doesn't work. There's just too many bugs. Um, and I had to bring in, I was going to some Discord chats and getting people to help out. And then I was finally able to get some of those agents at the start. And then Windsurf came in and then Cursor. And it's like, oh my God, this is so much easier. But there's still some bugs. You just have to know how to use some of the tools, the coder tools. And it's like, was it 3 weeks ago that Anthropic came up with a new coding tool? OpenAI just as well. It just dropped the other week or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember exactly. So these things are constantly changing. The question is, are your teams testing and evolving with them? Because if they're not, then you're not really knowing what is changing and how to make it work for you. And so a lot of people I hear say, well, I tried by coding, it didn't work. But that's sort of like saying I went to the gym once and I didn't get huge biceps. It just doesn't work that way. You have to keep iterating and refining. And in some cases, you can shortcut that by learning from others and being in the right communities and seeing how they're doing things. And being in the right communities doesn't cost you anything if you know which communities to be in. And the great thing about those is that people can jump in and help out sometimes if needed if you're getting stuck. And some people are just posting on YouTube and saying, here's how I build this workflow for a full hour for free. You just got exactly step by step. So there's a lot of free resources you don't have to pay. Now on the UX, I particularly like things like 99 Designs. If you're, at least for me, the quality of design and the flows are super important. And I don't like, taking any shortcuts there. So what I like is I set up a contest, and then I let the target audience, the target customers decide because I could like a particular design, but it doesn't mean that the target customers think that's the best one. So I might pick, the top three that I think could work based on all the research I've done, but then I let the target clients test it out and tell me which one they like. So that way, So money gone in kind of equity or hiring. Now I've got a design flow that works, and then implementing it is super easy. You're just taking design to Figma is now automated, and then boom, it goes into the app or web app or mobile app super quick. So you skip that step completely.
And a related question, Ella, that came up from Rupal is that, once you are in the testing phase of your MVP, what are some low-cost ways to test the market?
I love that. And you're in the right spot, Rup. It's all about testing. I feel us as founders, that's the quickest way to learn. And just as I said with that example of 99 design, like just because I like the design, who knows that that's the best one for the customer? I have to test it, otherwise I'm going blind. Um, so there are a few ways. I think one of the mistakes, well, it's not a mistake. It was just isn't available. When I first started testing the idea or validating the idea for Nurovibe, I hired an agency and they were doing interviews with, because it was C-suite, I'm targeting C-suite, and C-suite is not cheap. You have to pay them and you have to get into their calendars, which is a pain. It would have meant like stopping everything and chasing people's calendars and PAs is brutal. So I did have to pay an agency to get them interviewed. Um, but now there's ways in which you can start building, your dream list, and and I suggest, start with the ideal dream list and see if they're willing to test it with you. You can say things like, "Hey, I'm bootstrapped." Just say the truth. Some people are sympathetic. Look, I'm bootstrapped. I'm a co-founder. Love to get your feedback, and you'd be surprised how many people um, are willing to help. But it's always a numbers game. Some people are not necessarily not helping you. They're just swamped. They're too busy. And so you want to get as many people as possible. You can start building lists and start contacting them. Some people have their DMs open on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Just get as many people as possible. When I speak to a lot of founders that have scaled, so many have done this. Rupal is insane. They're just sitting, contacting people, like, would you be willing to speak to me for 5 minutes? The next person says no. Okay, next. The main thing here is don't take it personally. Just move on. Build a list. Keep going. Some people will jump in on a call with you. Some people might not. Doesn't matter. Just keep going. That's the absolute cheapest way. Now, if you're testing at scale, and I'm getting there with, no, I'm not at that stage with this company yet, but I want to test some of the marketing and videos at scale. There are ways in which you can set up something like a TikTok contest and start getting feedback. You do have to pay a little bit for that, for those bits, but there are different ways of doing that. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm building my Founder 50 list. So on the website, I have people can join in and be beta testers. So I'm guiding people to that funnel, but I'm also guiding certain people that I want in my favorite list to the Founder 50. So it comes with perks. You have to give exchange to these guys, because if they're going to be willing to spend their time and tell you, I like this, I don't like this, you have to give them some love. So what is that love? Are you going to give them, discount? Are you going to give them lifetime memberships? Are you going to give them, make them feel like co-founders because they are giving you feedback and they're building this with you? So just you can build it out in a way in which they're part of that, your sort of little community that is building the product with you. And I just love that concept of Founder 50, which is why I'm also building that actively. In terms of outlay of cost, it doesn't cost me to get the Founder 50, but it's just in the way that I'm giving discounts is going to be less revenue, but it's totally worth it.
I love that response. I just have one follow-up to that. So we have a product that is, I don't even know if it's B2B. It's B2B, but it's like for a specific industry professionals, let's say healthcare physicians, and another product that's much more retail facing. So when it comes to retail, I don't know that anyone knows the magic number, but how do you know you've tested enough? Because that's you would need a much bigger percentage of the market.
Oh, that's such a great question. And I don't think anybody can give
I
you.
know. If someone
But
could
I
tell
think what
you.
you're going to notice, RuPaul, is you start getting feedback on this is sort of a bit intuitive, but you you start getting feedback, and eventually you start noticing patterns. The point when you go from, oh, this is interesting to, I noticed the pattern. So then you go, okay, customers are answering in three buckets. When you start feeling that shift, you're onto something. So, and it gives you that sort of shift in pattern gives you two things. It doesn't only give you product feedback, it starts to give you segmentation, right? Because there's some customers that have specific characteristics in your physicians or your retail that have a specific demographic that are giving you a certain type of feedback, which is like, I do like this, but I don't like that. But it speaks more to their situation and how they're interacting with the product versus another group that says, well, I don't really like this, but they were coming from a different, perspective. So now you're noticing, okay, across all these different, uh, isolated points of feedback, the reality is that there's a pattern. And it typically, I can classify it into these three different buckets. And then the more you keep testing, you're like, yeah, okay. This guy I'm talking to, he's a C. And this girl, she's into an A. And now you're like, okay, now this is becoming repetitive. So there's no magic number. It's for you to feel when did you shift to that pattern recognition? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does actually. Thank you. That was great advice. I like that.
So we have time for one more question before we wrap up. Anyone from the audience? Any burning question we can answer for
I
you?
love that, Barbara, that you reached out to your network. Yeah, 30 minutes is quite a lot, so good for you. Sometimes I start with 5 or 10 because I know people are, but if they're giving you 30 minutes, that's fantastic. Well
The
done.
great thing about building something in travel is people love to talk about travel. So
Yes.
we got to the point where meetings or action interviews are going over because you can't, once people get going on a topic, it's hard to get them to stop talking. So
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Okay, guys, I think we are towards the very end. So before we wrap, Ella, what's the one thing or one message you'd like to leave every non-tech founder is listening today with?
Yeah, I think this message is more for don't wait. And I think it's going to sound a bit of a cliche, but this is the best time to start a company. Because, and I say for starting multiple companies, the availability of tools that are available is insane. If, you do a little bit of search, sometimes you just have to go to YouTube and like you're stuck like, you start with how do and you're gonna get at least 20 videos and people are posting this stuff for free, or you go to Twitter, sorry, X, and there's somebody who did a thread solving your exact problem. The tools are now near free if you know how to prompt them, and none of this. And you think your people that were building what you were trying to build just a year ago, they were spending 500,000 million only to find out it works, it didn't work. So it's a great time, and reach out for validation. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to help you. I think one of the first questions was on the VC front. I think this is going to shift. I honestly feel that the tide is going to shift because there's too many companies are scaling and generating millions in MRR, and sometimes it's just one founder. So don't get discouraged. There's ways to get around it. Um, but even if you do want a co-founder, which I think, as I said at the start, is a superpower, you're more likely to attract your dream co-founder if you have a product that is validated and your vision is already, available through even a prototype, or, a little V1 from Vercel is available. They can see your vision, so they're more likely to jump in with you if they can see something rather than just looking at a Google Doc. And now you can do it.
Great point there, Ella. So where can people find you, Ella, if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. So I'll just put my full name on the chat. And for anybody, just as we're asking for testing, anybody who wants to join the beta testing of Nurovibe. So this is if you want to dial in your focus, if you want to take, mental resilience or absolutely, crush your sleep structure, just check out Nurovibe AI. This is for the beta testing, and if you want to give a shot to the Founder 50, also you can find it there. Love to connect with you, some of you guys there.
This has been great, Ella. Thank you so much for everything that you shared today. I think the key message has been don't wait, start building right now. And on that front, if you're looking for a community or a space for you to grow and thrive, join us at Pionyr. Ella is one of our members as well, and we're here to support you. So again, thank you again, and see you next time. And I will be sharing the recording soon after.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.